Welcome to All Pro Football Data. My name is Jim Coburn, and today's episode, we're talking about Xavier Legette. So I've already done one video on him, but we're doing the final video, the final word, the final verdict on Xavier Legette as a prospect, because we have his athleticism testing, and with that comes the context of everything kind of put all together. So stay tuned until the end of the video when we get into all the information you need to know in terms of how he profiles as a prospect. But we're going to get into all of his data in this video, the full picture of him as a prospect, showing you the risks, showing you the positives to kind of see where he will project at the NFL level. So with all this stuff out of the way, let's get to his production profile. So starting out with his offensive market share production scores. Based on those scores, he had 83 percentile receiving market share score, 95 percentile in terms of his total offensive market share, and then 68 percentile in terms of his touchdown market share. These numbers are pretty decent based on their face value. The touchdown market share is not exactly where you want it to be. More so on that a little bit later, but it's decent data overall based on his market share data. Now, when you get to his efficiency scores, this is where he has some positives and some negatives. Based on his efficiency, he had a very good yards per reception score, pretty close to the 80 percentile there. But his touchdown percentage, or touchdowns per touch, was in the 30 percentile. More on that later on in the video, but this is kind of what it is. He's very good in terms of yards per reception, not so good in terms of touchdowns. So we're going to see what that means later on, but that is something to kind of stay with you here. Now, when he gets his athleticism traits, blew the door off the combine. 98 percentile in terms of explosiveness, which is essentially 99 percentile if you round up. 98 percentile in terms of his speed score. Did not do his flexibility testing. He did end up with, I think it was the 25th best RAS, or relative athleticism score, for a wide receiver. But I got a problem with that because, again, he didn't do the flexibility testing. So the flexibility testing probably would have lowered him as an athlete. It really would have. And I think the reason why he didn't do agility testing is because he probably wasn't going to do that well in terms of agility testing. But we don't know because he didn't do it. So I think that's kind of a little bit of a concern to me when wide receivers don't do their agility testing. And also the problems I have with RAS is the context of not having the full picture of things. But regardless about that, that is essentially where Xavier Legette kind of ends up. Is he's very explosive, very fast. But when you look at his adjusted production scores, this is where things kind of come into view, essentially. He had a 28 percentile age score, 64 percentile in terms of his MSA rating, and 74 percentile in terms of his pass rating. All these numbers are pretty much within the starter averages, but look at the Pro Bowl averages. Look at the All-Pro averages. Nowhere near those averages for Xavier Legette. So he definitely has the production traits of a starter at the next level, but doesn't quite have those elite traits. And when you get to his comparisons, so just to give you some context for the parameters that I put in place here, these are all the wide receivers that were 220 plus pounds and had the similar height ratio to Legette in terms of their height and their weight and those types of factors. Then I adjusted for below average touchdown percentage. Remember when I talked about touchdown percentage? Because it's very important. It's a contextual production trait. It means it's a wide receiver that gets a lot of yardage but doesn't quite get a lot of touchdowns. And these are all the wide receivers that tested like Legette based on that profile. Now, I know what many of you guys are probably going to say. Julio Jones is on this list. Demaryius Thomas is on this list. Let's go, baby. But look at the age of Julio Jones. Look at the age of Demaryius Thomas. And then look at the MSA rating and pass rating for Thomas and Julio Jones. None of those guys are similar to Legette based on those parameters. The MSA rating is 90 percentile for Demaryius Thomas, 90 percentile for Julio Jones. Legette, 64 percentile. The pass rating, 80 percentile. I would say the pass rating is where Legette is closest, is to Demaryius Thomas's pass rating. The pass rating deals with efficiency scores and production, whereas MSA takes out efficiency scores. But you can clearly see here that one of these guys is not like the other, or at least two of these guys is not like the other. Despite the fact that Xavier Legette does have great athleticism traits, he tested more similar to a guy like Marcus Davis, Tanner Connor than he did Julio Jones and Demaryius Thomas from a contextual production basis, his age, his level of competition, and those different factors. The last point to bring up is this is the thing about his production that kind of gives you context for him, which is when you look at Xavier Legette's college football production. Now, these numbers are based on an entirely different data set, okay? This is based on 79,964 college football prospects or performances since the 1970s, okay? So this is looking at every offensive position, running backs, quarterbacks, wide receivers, tight ends, stuff like that. I haven't really broke it down yet to kind of lower all the numbers and everything to kind of just isolate wide receivers, but I think it's enough data to kind of give you the context for what I'm talking about here, which is when you look at Legette from 2019 to 2020 to 2021 to 2022, his production was absolutely zilch. It took him 4 years to produce like a good wide receiver. That's a concern. Now, I haven't gone back in the data to kind of analyze everything because, again, that's a lot of data. 79,964 college football performances is a lot of performances. It's going to take me a long time to go through all that data and kind of do all the stuff I need to do to it to kind of make it, digestible to kind of talk about here. But this underscores the concern with him is his age, his other factors are just the issue here. It took him that long to get a 99 percentile, yards per reception score. It took him that long to get a decent TD percentage. It took him that long to get a decent touchdown market share score. It took him that long to get a 92 percentile receiving market share production score. And again, this is based on a different data set. So the other data set that I used is based on wide receivers in the NFL draft. This is more so about wide receivers in general in college football. So again, there's different parameters, different stuff like this, but I think this is necessary to bring up with Legette is his total college football production to give you the context of the concerns here. Is it took him 4 years to really produce at the college football level. How long is it going to take for him to produce at the NFL level? But we'll see. We'll see. There definitely is some positive here, but we'll see. Now, in terms of the overall outlook for Xavier Legette, Legette profiles as a backup to potential Pro Bowl wide receiver long term. Despite the fact of everything that I just said in terms of his concerns as a prospect, you still have the positives in terms of his athleticism, in terms of the production that he put up last year in his senior year, redshirt senior year. But those are kind of what you're looking at here in terms of him. The physical characteristics are there for Legette to become a premier possession receiver in the NFL. However, his age and career production are a massive concern. I mean, he's essentially like the Jimmy Clausen of wide receivers from a production standpoint. Jimmy Clausen was not productive at all for most of his career at Notre Dame, and then he finally had that great year to finish out his career, and then he ended up going in day 2, which is kind of what Legette is doing. Didn't really do much for most of his career, did really well in his last year. Now he's probably going to go day 2. But that is the concerns of Xavier Legette. I do see the physical potential with him. I do see these other sort of factors. But again, what does he have different? What's the difference between him and Julio Jones? Age. What's the difference between him and DK Metcalf, another wide receiver that everybody compares to Xavier Legette? Age. DK Metcalf had production concerns. DK Metcalf was an extremely young prospect when he came out. So there still was that upside that when he gets to the NFL level, whatever issues he might have, he could kind of develop into those things. He could get a little better. There was sort of the thinking that, okay, if DK Metcalf had stayed in college, he then would have put up the production that you're looking for in terms of that. But Legette had to wait 4 years to finally, in the 5th year, finally make it all go together. And that's just a risk. It's just a risk. But I think that's what you're looking at with Legette. I think that's the ultimate general final look, final outlook on him is there is a lot of these massive positives to him, but the negatives really weigh out. They outweigh the positives because we've seen older prospects that blew up the combine. We've seen older prospects that blew up in terms of production. But if you don't have all the traits together in tandem to kind of to synergize it, if you don't have the production with the age, with the athleticism all merging together to make a really great prospect, then you have somebody that you might need to avoid, you know. But overall, those are my thoughts on Xavier Legette. If you want to see more videos like this, check these videos out right here. Also, check out my Patreon page, patreon.com/jcoburn. Check out my X, formerly known as Twitter account, @Geometrics. Like, comment, and subscribe. What do you guys feel about Xavier Legette? Do you like him? Do you hate him? Do you love him? Do you think there's some flaws with my data analysis? Let me know. And I will see you guys in the next episode. Peace.